A wealthy commodities trader with the world at his feet.
My brother was a fun-loving guy.
He had anything he wanted. He had a lot of money, the Cadillacs and the Rolex watches.
Is viciously gunned down.
And they shot him again and again and again.
With his wife and kids in the home at the time of the attack.
It was a very traumatic event to the family, with people with guns threatening them.
You can't dismiss the fact it was a home invasion, but a lot of it didn't add up.
I had no idea at all how this could have happened.
Police chased down a number of suspects.
There was a complete falling out between them. Someone could get killed over a debt that they didn't pay.
A sudden disappearance leaves everyone on edge.
There was a trader. He disappeared off the face of the earth. It was suspected there was foul play involved.
One dead and one missing. Put a different spin on this type of investigation.
Every lead brings investigators to a dead end.
It's very frustrating to have a case that hits a brick wall.
Until 30 years later.
They were holding a very big secret inside.
When the shocking truth is revealed.
Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. That's not even human. That's the devil.
Just 30 minutes outside of Chicago lies Inverness, Illinois.
Inverness is one of the wealthiest suburbs of Chicago. It's a safe, beautiful neighborhood.
Some would call it very rich, very large homes, and very few crimes are ever committed in that area.
But on April 30th, 1979, at 3:20 p.m., police receive a distressing call from a 15-year-old girl named Becky Gamari.
Her words were, "There's been a robbery. My dad's been shot." She was bleeding from the chest. The police responded immediately.
As we entered through the front door, we were met by Becky Gamari. She was crying and pointing downstairs. I went downstairs and I saw a male who was leaning back in the sofa who appeared to have numerous gunshot wounds. There was a woman who was kneeling at the feet of the victim, crying almost in hysterics.
The woman identifies herself as Jackie Gamari. She says the victim is her husband, Carl, and that she and her 3 youngest children, Bobby, Carly, and Nick, were in the home when the intruders stormed in.
Those children must have been terrified and felt so helpless. It's horrifying.
The families were taken out to the squad cars so that they were secure and away from everyone.
Investigators set to work processing the crime scene, starting with the body.
I went over to the victim. I didn't find a pulse. There was a number of bullet holes in his chest with the blood basically draining down to his pants. I noticed a 9mm gun, and there were a number of 9mm casings that were strewn about the victim's feet. There was also a small .380 caliber handgun. It appeared that a 9mm was placed to make some type of a statement. This could be a staged killing. The victim, his legs were crossed at his ankles. It didn't appear to be a natural position. I went and took an inventory of what the rest of the house looked like. The bedrooms, the dresser drawers had been opened. A number of items appeared to be tossed on the floor. I could see that there were jewelry boxes that still had jewelry in them, which raises questions as to why they actually came to that residence.
Was this a legitimate robbery? Was this staged to cover something up? You can't dismiss the fact it was a home invasion, but a lot of it didn't add up. It did bring into question that they were there really to kill the victim.
We took a number of fingerprint lifts from the kitchen, the dining room, and the bedroom area.
One of the officers noticed there was no forced entry. Nobody kicked in the door or pried it.
As police continue working the scene, Carl's family receives the tragic news.
My sister called me and says, "You better get home, Carl was shot." So the whole neighborhood where the house was all cordoned off. We were told by the police he's in the house, he's dead, and they're investigating. So we were all like stunned.
When this happened, it was just a huge, huge shock, and we didn't know how to react. Disbelief and just can't be.
Carl Gamari was born in Elmwood Park, Illinois in 1944. He was the third of 4 children.
My brother Carl was a fun-loving guy. You know, he liked to go out and have fun, you know, go on dates with girls and go to parties and things like that.
When Carl was in high school, he met the love of his life.
When he started dating Jackie, he was like 18, and I think she was 17 at the time. He just knew that this was the one, and, you know, he wanted to get married, and he wanted to get married now.
Still teenagers, Carl and Jackie started a family right away.
Carl was excited to be a dad. They had 4 kids. Becky was the oldest, Bobby was the second oldest, Carly was the third daughter, and then Nick was the youngest. He was his son.
By 1977, Carl had the perfect family and the perfect job, working in finance at the Chicago Board of Trade.
Carl climbed up the ladder. He was energetic, and he loved it, and it fit his personality to a T.
He had anything he wanted. He had a lot of money. He came to Cadillacs, Rolex watches, and things like that. He started living a high life.
From the outside, Carl's life seemed picture perfect. But now, his violent death leaves his family shattered.
He's been shot, and I was shocked. You know, no one knew anything. What's going on? I had no idea at all how this could have happened.
Investigators start by interviewing Carl's family, who were also witnesses to the crime.
I took Jackie and the 2 girls out to the garage so I could get a general statement from them as to what occurred.
Jackie was crying and very upset. Becky was crying. Bobby was crying. This was the most traumatic thing children could go through. They said Carl went to work. Jackie was at home with Bobby, her 13-year-old daughter, 5-year-old Carly, and 2-year-old Nick. Around 12 or 12:30, Bobby is laying on the couch, and she's watching TV, and 2 men come in, and they have guns.
She said the 2 men were wearing stocking masks and dark clothing, and they had come in through the unlocked back door.
They point the guns at her, and they ask her, "Where's your mother?" So Bobby leads these men to the master bedroom, where Jackie is on the phone. They ask Jackie for her money, and she says, "I only have $20. And they said, "We're here for more than that." These men tie Bobby's hands behind her back, and then they tie up Jackie. They force them into the master bedroom closet with Carly, with baby Nick. Time is passing. Bobby said that she heard a man yelling, "No," who she thought was her father, and she heard 3 banging sounds, which she believed were gunshots.
Becky came home approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon from school. She walked in through the front door, called for her mom. All she heard was crying from the master bedroom. At that time, she found them banging on the closet door to be let out.
Once Becky opens up the closet doors, Bobby went directly down to the basement, and Bobby saw her father's bloody, bullet-ridden body laying on that couch. It is difficult to imagine how terrifying this must have been.
While the family lived through an extremely traumatic ordeal, police are hopeful that with their help, they can catch Carl's killers.
Jackie and Bobby said that the suspects had actually pulled up their masks, so they had their face exposed to them.
Jackie described the first suspect as a male white, mid to late 20s to 30s, tall, dark-haired, and also had a mustache. The second suspect was shorter than the first, slightly heavier, was a white male, but had a pale complexion and facial hair.
Bobby and Jackie were able to do composites of the faces they saw. I think there was a lot of hope somebody's going to recognize these individuals.
When we heard about the sketch, we thought that would be it. They'd be able to find him. I was hoping to get the information out as quickly as possible with the suspect's description, so that if someone was possibly stopped or seen within the general area, a patrol vehicle could have stopped them.
In Inverness, where crime is virtually non-existent, Police believe there is more to this case than meets the eye.
It appeared to be a staged crime. It could be someone who owed money to someone and being shot for that, a jealous boyfriend. It could be a number of different things. You can't close your mind to any possibility at that point in time.
Coming up, investigators uncover sordid secrets.
He might have had some associates who might have been involved with the mob. It definitely raised a red flag.
The killers evade detectives until an unexpected witness steps forward.
You told me how it was going to be done, how they were going to kill Carl.
To reveal a dark and twisted plot no one predicted.
As soon as they knew how Carl was going to be murdered, and that's exactly what happened to him.
That was the missing key.
The murder of commodities trader and father of four, Carl Gamari. His wife and young family were at home at the time of the terrifying attack.
Jackie and the two girls were mostly in shock. They were completely overwhelmed by what was happening.
Jackie and Bobby saw the gunman. Armed with their description, officers go door to door looking for witnesses.
One of the neighbors saw two men coming from the Gamaris through her yard, and she thought one of them was carrying like a jewel bag. After that neighbor pointed out where she saw the two men walking through her yard, the detectives went back and followed that path. They had found a cigarette butt that still had ash on it by her driveway.
That cigarette butt was collected by the State Police Crime Lab, but in 1979 there was no DNA, so there really wasn't much of the evidence that could be collected off of that cigarette butt.
More witnesses come forward to help police trace the suspect's movements.
There was a woman who was in her car around the time that this incident took place. She stated that she saw a beater-type gray car parked on the side of the street. When she returned approximately 3 o'clock or so, she said that she saw the vehicle oncoming towards her. She said that the driver was a white male. The second passenger in the front was a white male, but he was trying to slump down in the seat. In her words, she thought he was trying to hide himself.
The neighbor who saw that vehicle coming towards her with the two men was also able to do a composite.
It's similar to the one Jackie and Bobby gave police.
Composites are very, very useful. You can put them in the newspaper, you can get them on the news, you can get them out there for people, other agencies, to see if anybody could identify them as possible suspects. So after the canvass was conducted, they then did a sweep of the area between the victim's house and where this car was observed to see if they could find any evidence. They also discovered tire impressions and some footwear impressions that were in the mud there where the car had been parked.
Back at the crime scene, investigators get an unexpected visitor.
I noticed someone approached me and he pulled out his credentials as being a Chicago police officer and told his name was Sam Greco. Sam said that he was a family friend. The girls knew Sam. They felt comfortable around him.
He said that he had been called by the daughter, that something had happened, so he was coming out to see what assistance he could lend.
On the day of the murder, Becky made 2 phone calls. She did call 911. Her next call was to Sam, to tell him what had taken place.
Sam originally arrived up the scene about an hour after the initial call. He had advised him that he had been on the phone with Jackie. This was about 12:30 in the afternoon, and that during their conversation, she said somebody was there, and he heard some voices in the background, and then the call was disconnected. So he had offered to give them his phone records so they could try to establish a timeline of when that occurred.
Based on the time of the phone call, police believe the gunman arrived at 12:30 p.m. and left by 3 that afternoon. They spent over 2 hours in the home, a detail that puzzles the investigators.
They spent so much time in the house, which is not normal. Home invaders usually come in, take care of business, and leave. They don't sit around. Second, the amount of items that were left behind didn't indicate that this was a straight-up home invasion.
My question was whether or not they knew that Carl Gamari was coming home at that point in time, and why did they kill him?
Who did it and why? And why my brother? What did he do that he deserved to have his life snuffed away and taken away? We had no idea who it could be.
In their search for answers, detectives turn back to Carl's wife, Jackie.
Anytime you're investigating a murder within a family, you have to look at the surviving spouse. It was clear that Jackie hadn't been the one to shoot Carl. 2 armed invaders came into their house and locked him in the closet. It was very traumatic to the kids and to Jackie. To have all of a sudden their peaceful day broken down with people with guns and then threatening them and not letting them move around the house, not knowing what was going to happen next.
They were absolutely terrified. Even after the suspects had left, it was difficult to get them to concentrate on making a statement. Jackie was crying, upset.
When detectives ask Jackie about her relationship with Carl, she tells them she loved him and that he was her high school sweetheart. But what she reveals about her marriage surprises investigators.
Carl and Jackie had a rather unorthodox situation at times. Over the years, they both had affairs, and they would bring their lovers home.
When you get information like that, that's an important thing to follow up on and look further to see if that has anything to do with what occurred here.
Had the couple's infidelities led to Carl's murder?
You have to look at that as a possibility.
It definitely raised a red flag.
It was definitely shocking.
Getting the cold-blooded murder of Carl Gamari, have learned he and his wife, Jackie, had both been unfaithful.
That's a big red flag and needs to be looked at very thoroughly.
Jackie tells police they had recently agreed to work on their marriage.
They seemed to be getting better as you got into 1979. They were trying to work it out.
They went on a romantic vacation. They were making a plan to do another big trip to Africa. They were buying a new house, and they would tell friends that, yeah, things are getting back together for us. We're going to make an effort to make this work, especially because of the kids.
A year before the murder, the couple had even decided to renew their vows.
We as a family thought, wow, this is nice. This is really nice to see, that they wanted to get together and they have us there witness the renewing of their vows.
They were like 2 lovebirds. He was gleaming from ear to ear, and so was Jackie, and they seemed like a wonderful couple.
While Jackie was also a victim in this crime, detectives still need to know if she'd have anything to gain financially from Carl's death.
It was learned that there was only about a $30,000 life insurance policy. Carl had never signed a will, which ties it up in court, and it could be 7 years before you see any of the financial gain from this. And so this kind of cleared Jackie of being in the spotlight of the investigation.
Investigators consider whether Carl and Jackie's renewed marriage could have driven one of their former lovers to murder. When they ask Jackie who she had an affair with, her answer is surprising.
Jackie and Sam Greco had an affair.
She said that she had dated Sam for quite some time, but that she had broken off the relationship with Sam to recommit to her marriage with Carl.
Jackie had said when she became pregnant with Nick, she stopped seeing Sam.
Detectives need to know, was Sam a jealous ex? Could he have killed Carl to have Jackie to himself?
Sam was interviewed once on the phone and then again in person. He had met Jackie at a wedding, and he was doing some private investigative work, and Jackie had hired him to follow Carl to see if he was having an affair. There was an indication from Sam's investigation that Carl was having an affair.
And that ultimately led to them initiating a relationship.
Sam also told the investigators that he and Jackie had been lovers, but they were now just friends.
Sam denied any involvement with this case.
They took his phone records, fingerprinted them, and they interviewed individuals associated with Sam.
He was considered a hero within the Chicago Police Department. The police back then still investigated him as much as they could.
The investigators ruled him out as not being involved in this.
With Sam eliminated from the investigation, detectives next look at the woman with whom Carl had been having an affair.
Gail Kayak was someone whom Carl had actually hired and worked with.
When Gail was interviewed, her description was it was kind of two adults having some fun together. It was nothing serious. She knew it was going nowhere. She knew Carl was married.
Gail tells investigators she and Carl broke things off about a year ago and that there wasn't any animosity between them.
She ended up, after the relationship was over between her and Carl, had a boyfriend, got pregnant. Given the affair had been over for a year, it just made really no sense that she would be involved in this in any way.
Just when detectives think they've hit another dead end, Gail gives them a stunning new lead. She says they need to speak to Carl's former friend and colleague, Ned Kaiser.
Ned Kaiser was one of the closer people to Carl at the Board of Trade. They had worked together there for a while. They socialized.
Gail claims Ned not only knew about her affair with Carl, but told Jackie about it.
Carl and Ned were friends. Carl would use his apartment to be with his girlfriend. Ned ultimately got upset with Carl, told Jackie that Carl was using his place to be with his girlfriend. Once Carl found out that Ned was the one who told Jackie about Gail, that soured the relationship.
Gail also tells police Ned had a dark reputation.
She had rumored that he had ties to organized crime. Whenever you're dealing with people with money and investment and all, there's always a possibility that someone could get killed over a debt that they didn't pay.
Had Carl and Ned fallen out over money? Had Ned put out a hit on his former friend?
You always look at the big picture. Business dealings with Ned, him betraying Carl to Jackie about using his place, Ned having some possible mob connections. I think you got to look at everything. You have to see what's there. Where does that lead you? Is this a person who has a reason to kill Carl?
They're following a tip that the murder of successful trader Carl Gamari may have been a targeted hit, one organized by his former friend and coworker, Ned Kaiser.
Ned Kaiser might have been, quote-unquote, involved with the mob.
During the 1970s, Chicago was very much involved with the criminal network of the mob, and a number of people wound up dead every year.
Organized crime had a hand in gambling. From information obtained from co-workers and people that knew Carl, he gambled at the Board of Trade, he would gamble outside. Well, if individuals are gambling like that, then chances are they would cross paths with organized crime people.
5 days after the homicide, Ned is brought in for an interview. Police ask about his friendship and working relationship with Carl.
The relationship with Ned and Kaiser and Carl and the family was an extensive, involved one. They had known each other for approximately 9 years, and at one point, when Ned was going through a divorce, they actually let him move into their house.
Ned says that's why he had a hard time keeping Carl's affair secret.
Ned had told investigators that the reason he came forward to Jackie was because he was friends with both of them, and he just felt that Jackie was being mistreated by the way Carl was acting and needed to correct it.
Detectives ask Ned if Carl was indebted to him or if they had any conflict about money.
Ned denied ever having any kind of a fight with Carl. Ned was asked if he had any involvement, if he knew anything about Carl's murder, and he denied having any direct knowledge. There was nothing that anyone could dig up that would say Ned was responsible for Carl's death.
The investigators took a very hard look at him to see if there was any way that he could have committed this crime. And They were able to rule him out. There was no evidence connecting him to the murder of Carl Gamari.
Investigators are forced to let Ned go.
The police talked to everyone that they possibly could. If they talked to one person and that person mentioned other people, they went and talked to those people as well. And then it gets to a point where there's just no other leads to pursue at that time. So the police are essentially waiting for new information.
Authorities once again turn to the public in an attempt to find the men who killed Carl and terrorized his family.
Their composites are very critical in our ongoing investigation in identifying the shooters.
I remember cutting out all the headlines and all that. Boy, something's going to be recognized with the sketch and something's going to happen with this and come about from it. But days would go on and nothing.
When the sketches were released, there wasn't a lot of information that came in. Nothing substantial at all.
Detectives hope that the autopsy report will provide a crucial new lead.
Carl had been shot 6 times. The fatal wound had penetrated his chest into his heart and severed the aorta. When you have multiple shots like that from 2 different guns, it's apparent that their intent was to kill him.
And they shot him again and again and again and again, a total of 6 times.
Since the medical examiner didn't find any defense wounds on Carl, there is no physical evidence on his body to link to the perpetrators. Frustration grows when detectives get the report on the fingerprints found at the crime scene.
There were no known matches of any of those latent fingerprints. They had no real suspects.
Didn't seem like anybody was going to be arrested for this.
With the killer still on the loose, the town of Inverness is on edge, while Carl's family lives in fear.
A couple of days after the original murder, someone had put a threatening note in the mailbox. Jackie then went to the police and said she was being threatened, and that was her concern for her safety.
When I found that out, I was very disturbed. I was concerned about Jackie and the kids. Somebody wanted my brother killed.
2 weeks after the murder, police make a disturbing discovery.
It came to the attention of the initial investigators that there was a trader, worked at the Chicago Board of Trade, had just disappeared. It was suspected there was foul play involved.
Detectives learn his name is Artie Jones, and he's one of Carl's business associates.
Art Jones knew Carl. There may have been some money involved between the 2 of them.
No one knew what happened to him. He left for work, drove into the city, and was never heard from again.
Could the 2 cases be connected?
Now put a new light, a new focus with 2 traders in close proximity, 1 dead and 1 missing, put a different spin on this type of investigation.
At that point in time, when we heard the news and it was all over the papers, that we thought, wow, now that we know there's something going on at the Board of Trade.
When you had Carl, who was killed and being part of Board of Trade, and then you have Artie, who disappears after going to work at the Board of Trade, those don't happen often.
And when Artie Jones happened, that was very concerning. It was, we wanted to find out, okay, who's after Artie and who's after Carl, if there was somebody, in fact, after.
Weeks after Carl Gamari's murder, his coworker, Artie Jones, has vanished. Detectives are hunting for a potential connection between the 2 cases.
Through the Highland Park investigation of Artie, they interviewed his wife, and she said that since the murder of Carl, he had become very edgy. He was very secretive about going out to meet some people for business at that time and then never coming back. It just heightened that concern she had about the 2 being related.
There was just no trace of him. They ran credit checks, they did phone records. They had absolutely nothing of where this individual may have gone or why he disappeared.
They located his vehicle near O'Hare Airport.
No reason why it was there, no rhyme. Couldn't put him on an airplane. There was just nothing. He was gone.
That investigation was rather lengthy, and they never did locate him. And eventually, his wife had him declared dead. It's very frustrating to have a case that hits a brick wall.
Carl's family continues to push for answers.
I was persistent. I would call. I wanted to hear from the horse's mouth, from the detectives. What's going on? What's the next step? What are you looking at? Months and months and months turned into a year turned into 2 years. Then you kind of like lost faith a little bit.
Carl's loved ones try to cope with the terrible realization that his killers may never be found.
The investigation wasn't turning up anything. They broadcasted and showed those pictures of the two men for a long time. No one knew anything. The case is considered a cold case.
30 years later, the case is reopened.
Detectives Mike Kirby and Bill Stutzman took over that investigation, gave it new life. These were people who had investigated, hundreds of violent crimes in their careers.
I had spent 9.5 years on a homicide task force. So this was my first actual cold case.
We were told to look at this case from 30 years ago. Right away, you're like, 30 years? Who's even going to be alive from back then that we could talk to? But when we sat down and we compiled our plan of action, people we wanted to talk to, we became extremely excited about the possibility of this being solved.
As the new detectives start digging into the cold case, they are confronted with a daunting problem.
Barrington Police Department had 2 floods in their basement where their evidence was kept. These floods basically contaminated any of the evidence, ruling it unusable. Any DNA we might have was gone.
That's a major blow in an investigation. Most cold cases nowadays are solved through forensic evidence. We had none of that.
Then, in 2011, a stunning turn of events reignites the investigation.
We get a phone call. It was shocking to us.
Artie Jones had been located, living under an assumed name in Las Vegas, part of a fraud investigation by the federal government, and located him. We were extremely shocked that he was alive.
Investigators fly to Nevada to interview Artie Jones about Carl's murder.
Well, the first thing we wanted to know was what relationship did Artie Jones have at all with Carl? Did they have any kind of business transaction? He claimed he didn't even know him. So then we focused on why did he disappear then. When we talked to Mr. Jones, he said that he was having financial problems. He didn't like his job, he didn't like his life, he was unhappy with his marriage, so he just faked his disappearance. And that became very clear that he had staged all this by planning the car by the airport. The two had no connection. The Gamari murder and his disappearance were not related.
With the Artie Jones mystery solved, detectives are again left with no leads.
What we decided to do was to work this like it was a fresh case and just start from the beginning with no preconceived notions, no thoughts on where we were going to go with it.
Bill Stutzman and Mike Kirby re-interviewed everyone who had been interviewed that they could find back in 1979 and 80, and one of the people they interviewed was Jackie's sister, Tootsie. When police interviewed Tootsie the night of Carl's murder, she told them on the morning of April 30th, Jackie called Tootsie and told her to come over that day. And if Tootsie had come that day, I don't know if she would have been another victim.
Detectives bring Jackie's sister, Tootsie, in for an interview. As they question her, she makes a jaw-dropping revelation.
She said, I've been ridden with guilt throughout the years. I've seen what it did to the kids, what it did to his family. I can only be truthful about this. I can only tell you what was told to me.
Tootsie was having ulcers after the murder of Carl. She was holding a very big secret inside.
It troubled her to keep this secret for so long. She just realized, I believe, that it was the right thing to do, and that's what she always wanted to do.
And she proceeded to tell us about 2 months prior to the murder that Jackie had said, I don't love Carl anymore. I don't want to be with him. This is the time when Jackie and Carl were getting back together.
Jackie had supposedly stopped the affair with Sam Greco.
Based on what we learned, that was not the truth. Her affair still continued.
It was very shocking. It gives you a different light view of Jackie, yes, as a person and the type of individual she is.
What Tootsie says next leaves investigators stunned.
Jackie had told her of a plan that she had with Sam.
Jackie said to Tootsie, "We've found a way to get rid of Carl. We're going to make it look like a home invasion. Some men are going to come in, they're going to tie me up, and they're going to wait for Carl to come home and kill him."
Tootsie couldn't believe what her sister was saying to her, and they just kind of ended the conversation with Tootsie saying, "Jackie, you don't have to do that. Divorce him. Just divorce him." And Jackie would reply, "If I divorce him, then I don't get all the money."
Jackie had told her how Carl was going to be murdered, and that's exactly what happened to him.
It seemed almost mind-blowing to think that Jackie could be involved in such a crime as to expose her daughters and her infant to their father getting killed in the home.
Investigators tell Tootsie they'll need more than just her word to lay charges.
They decided to ask her if she would be willing to record conversations with her sister Jackie. At first, Tootsie said no, she didn't want to do it. She didn't want to hurt Jackie.
We had emphasized with her that, no, we're not saying Jackie physically killed Carl, but she was part of a plan in which Carl was killed. And we had said, we're asking you to put an open-ended statement to her and see how she responds. She agreed to do it.
That was the missing key to make this case go forward.
After the cold-blooded killing of father of four, Carl Gamari, police learn his wife Jackie plotted his murder with her former lover, Sam Greco. But investigators need hard evidence to arrest her. They convince Jackie's sister, Tootsie, to record a conversation.
Hi, Jackie.
How you doing?
I'm not doing good, honey. The police have been here about Carl, and they've been asking me a lot of questions. They're saying I might have to go in front of the grand jury. I don't know if you remember what you told me.
I do. Are you going to do that, though, to me?
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to.
Oh, my God. So just tell him that I wish he was dead. Don't tell him I said that, please.
They already know, Jackie. You told me how it was going to be done, how they were going to break in and tie you up and put you in the closet and then kill Carl. You
gotta help me, Tootsie. I can't go to jail. You gotta help me.
I can't lie. I can't lie.
Did you just tell them you're all confused and don't remember?
But they know I remember. They know I do.
Those recorded conversations are devastating.
Jackie saying, "Can you lie for me? Can't you say you forget?" There was truth to what Tootsie was saying. And that's why Jackie wanted to lie for her. That was very damaging evidence.
Those recordings were all that were needed to have an arrest warrant issued.
Police bring Jackie down to the station.
We did not tell her she was under arrest, but she was not going anywhere. We had the arrest warrant. During the course of the interview, not only did we tell her, we talked to Tootsie, who told us about their conversation. We played portions for Jackie.
And I don't do that stuff, and that's enough to put me away. Okay. What am I supposed to say when they ask me why I said that to you? What am I supposed to say?
That I can't answer. I don't know. Maybe you didn't mean to tell me, but you did.
What should I do?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
You're my sister, but you're a witness against me. Your testimony is enough to put me away. I'm going to go to jail.
Confronted by her own words, Jackie tries to put the blame on her former lover, Sam.
Because she wanted to be able to say, yes, okay, early on, I said, let's do this. But then I backed out. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. So therefore, I'm not guilty of Carl's murder.
There are so many things Jackie did that tells you what kind of a person she is. She wanted to be with Sam. She didn't want to be with Carl.
After the murder, Sam and Jackie married a few months later.
Several years later, Sam and Jackie were divorced. We continued a full-force investigation into Sam Greco's involvement, as also pursuing the two shooters. And before we could gain enough evidence to charge him, he passed away from his medical conditions.
On March 27th, 2013, Jackie alone is charged with the first-degree murder of her husband, Carl Gamari.
Jackie was the true monster. Without Jackie, this crime never would have happened.
In 2016, a jury finds Jackie guilty, but the verdict is overturned on appeal. Prosecutors offer Jackie a deal. She pleads guilty to murder and is sentenced to 22 years in prison.
Justice finally was served. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it.
She was a true sociopath. And not just for taking Carl's life, but because of what she did to her children. She chose to have her children be victims of this traumatic event just for her own selfish needs to get rid of her husband.
A woman that involves her own children in a scheme, in a plan, in a plot to have their father murdered, her husband murdered. I don't know, if you ask me, that's not even human. That's the devil.
4 decades after the murder, police are still searching for the gunman.
This remains an open and active investigation. It's never going to stop. If there's any new information, the police are going to follow up on it. No matter how long those shooters live and how much time passes, they can never stop looking over their shoulder.
My brother was a good guy. He was very determined to succeed in anything he did. To see how he would have been.
But money greases the wheels. There's a lot going through Las Vegas.
You have beauty, riches, intrigue, mystery.
Viva Las Vegas. Viva Las Vegas.
Infamous convicted killer, Margaret Rudin.
Margaret Rudin locked up for about 2 decades.
This story is an absolute roller coaster. It's one of those fact is stranger than fiction.
After 4 failed marriages, Ron met Margaret Rudin.
Her millionaire husband. And deal. That's motive.
Ron was shot and killed, we know that. And then the question is, who's behind it?
Margaret Rudin indicted on murder charges.
A lot of people thought that Margaret Rudin had to be innocent. Others believe that she basically is the most evil person on the face of this earth.
Margaret Rudin, unfazed, stoic, cold.
Killed him for money. Fled the scene.
You spot Margaret Rudin, call our hotline at 1-800-CRIME-TV.
Black Widow. That's the persona from the media coverage and the fact that she was charged and convicted of murder.
We find the defendant guilty.
Just out of prison after a 20-year sentence, Margaret Rudin sat down with 2020 to tell her story and talk about how she's still fighting to clear her name.
I am Margaret Rudin Mason. I did not kill Ron. They zeroed in on me.
She's been locked up for the past 20 years for the brutal beheading and murder of her millionaire husband, Ron Rudin.
They had no evidence. They had no witnesses.
Margaret Rudin, dubbed the Black Widow of Las Vegas. Black Widow.
Black Widow.
They stuck the name on me that Black Widow, Black Widow, Black Widow, like I had killed somebody before, or like that I was in the habit. I think that people don't know me. They don't try to know.
Margaret Rudin is a chameleon. She's been a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead.
I like change. I'm a Gemini.
She's a chameleon, definitely.
I like to wear wigs. I like short, I like long, I like curly, I like straight. I don't want to look the same way all the time. Even when I sit in front of your cameras, I may look different, but you're still gonna know it's me.
I'm Greg Mullinex. I'm an attorney here in Fresno, California, and I represent Margaret Rudin. There's so many holes in this case. After going through all this stuff, considering everything, I'm convinced that Margaret Rudin's innocent. She was wrongly convicted.
Even though it's circumstantial, all the evidence pointed to Margaret Rudin. I'm 100% convinced that Margaret was responsible for Ron's death.
It was a mystery, which, quite truthfully, to this day hasn't been solved.
What happened to Ron? We still don't know. 20 years later, they never checked on anyone but me. I want the truth to come out. I have waited a long time.
This story really starts in Las Vegas in the 1960s.
Got a funny feeling this is going to be a long show, boys.
We're talking old school Vegas, where Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack held court in the Sands Hotel, and the mob's tentacles ran deep.
Good old times. It was smooth. Everything is nice and smooth. But underneath that river of calmness was a
Point across so you knew, don't screw with us because we will kill you. It's pretty simple.
It was into this risky, freewheeling environment that 30-year-old Ron Rudin landed in Las Vegas in 1960, with big dreams of making his fortune in real estate.
Ron saw great things that could transpire in Las Vegas back then. I love this picture. It's like he's looking at you, saying, hey, I'm Ron Rudin, and I have a lot of plans for my future.
He bought a strip mall, he had his office right there. But in the 80s and the 90s, when the explosion of construction hit in Las Vegas, that is when he started to make his real fortune.
He watched Las Vegas just explode, and he was part of that with his real estate business.
You could make a killing, and that's exactly what Ron Rudin did.
So this is old Vegas. What was Ron's reputation like around these parts?
Ron's reputation, he had a reputation of being a hard-nosed businessman.
Some people will say that Ron Rudin was unscrupulous, that it was anything at all costs to make money.
He didn't like the glitz and the glitter. Ron Rudin wasn't a casino guy, but he absolutely made a name for himself in Sin City.
He was one of the characters here in Las.
That's what he drove, the black Cadillac.
He wasn't afraid to show off that he had made it. He knew he was on top of the pile.
Women were attracted to Ron Rudin, and a lot of it was because of his lifestyle and his money. And he absolutely loved playing the love game.
He had a twinkle. He was very handsome, not just your average handsome. He really stood out.
And when it came to his marriages, Ron went through wives like a casino dealer goes through packs of cards.
Ron Rudin was married a total of 5 times, and each one of those marriages was its own story.
Ron's first marriage in 1962 to wife Donna lasted less than a year. After about an 8-year hiatus, he gets hitched to his second wife, Carolyn. While their marriage eventually failed, Ron kept a bracelet that she gave him with his name on it in diamonds, and he never took that thing off.
Peggy was Ron's third wife, and this one appeared to be a happy marriage. But behind closed doors, Peggy suffered from severe depression, and that depression would manifest itself in the way of suicide. Peggy put a gun to her own head in the couple's bedroom.
The gun that she used to kill herself with had Ron's fingerprints on it. It raised eyebrows. People thought maybe he killed Peggy.
But there was a full investigation into her death, and it was, in fact, ruled a suicide.
After getting married and splitting up for a 4th time, this time with Wet Mason.
Well, I had made a joke to one of my friends that went to our church. I had said to her, the very next husband I have is going to wear cowboy boots, because in Vegas, that means they're macho, and I like macho.
Yeah, that's her Southern background.
So one day she said, there's a guy over there behind us that keeps looking at you, and he's wearing cowboy boots.
Well, she was very smitten with him.
I tell you, I've never met anybody better and slicker and smarter and suaver than he was.
She just seemed like a really sweet person. And then I started hearing, you know, the other stuff.
She didn't really realize what she had gotten into.
One night, he said to me, quietly, what would you say if I told you I murdered Peggy?
Going to the chapel and we're gonna get married.
I think I fall in love too easily. But I don't regret them.
Gee, I really love you and
Margaret would never have a problem finding a husband. It's like Liz Taylor, you know.
I have a thing with men. I want to be needed. I need to be needed. I was born in Memphis. I am the oldest in the family. I have 3 daughters.
Her mother seemed like a really nice, warm person, in contrast with her dad, who I think was a strict religious guy.
We could not wear shorts, wear slacks, cut our hair. You weren't supposed to do anything for pleasure. When Elvis Presley was the rage, he refused to let us watch him on TV because of his gyrations.
She was always traveling and stuff. She went to a bunch of schools, like 10 or 15, something like that.
My father was a barber. He would open a new barber shop, stay there until he got tired of the place, and so we'd move someplace else.
So Margaret settled down and got married.
I was married to Jerry Mason right out of high school.
She had 2 children, Michael and a daughter, Christina. They lived just north of Chicago along Lake Michigan.
I wanted the white picket fence. We had it. They had the dog, they had the swings, they had all the things that I never had.
She really seemed to have a perfect life, a settled life, until she didn't.
My husband had an affair. I went to real estate school, got my license, and found I could make it on my own. So I did.
But for Margaret, it was hardly one and done when it came to marriage. Over the following years, she would quickly marry and divorce 2 more husbands.
I think I'm easy to be married to because I'm a people pleaser. That's why none of the men in my life ever asked me for a divorce. Not one. I always had to bring it up first.
By 1981, Margaret was looking for a fresh start in life, so she moved to Las Vegas, where she got married and split up with husband number 4. But just 4 months after the divorce, she decides to roll the dice again and marry wealthy Vegas realtor Ron Rudin.
There are a total of 8 combined previous marriages, but from the beginning, it looks promising.
The thing that I liked the most about Ron was he had a very dry wit, and he was fun to be around. Did you want to hear he was the best lover I ever had?
They made a dynamic, good-looking couple. By all rights, they should have had a wonderful life.
For Margaret, she says everything darkened when she moved into Ron's house, which was located right behind the strip mall and his office.
She did not know that the house had not been renovated since Peggy's suicide.
One night, he said to me, quietly, what would you say if I told you I murdered Peggy? And I kind of caught my breath, and I didn't know what to say, because if I'd have said, yes, I want the details, I would have had to have left. I just said, no. No, you're not going to relieve your guilt by telling me I don't want to know. He said, okay. And we never brought it up again.
From a distance, they look like
It wouldn't be long before Margaret discovers that Ron is having an affair with an IRS agent.
In Margaret's case, she was allegedly having an affair with a man named Yehuda Sharon. He claims to be a former officer in the Mossad, which is Israel's intelligence agency.
We weren't having an affair because I was married. If I hadn't have been married, he wasn't my type.
Sharon also denied there was an affair, but the mutual jealousy and suspicion all came to a head one night when Margaret says she overheard Ron talking to a woman that he dated before they got married.
And we got into an argument because the closest to death I was ever going to get by the look on his face. And I said, okay, that's it, I'm out of here. And he said, no, 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 you don't have to go. I promise you nothing like that'll ever happen again.
They went and had some counseling. She got to understand him a little bit better. She loved him. She really didn't want to divorce him.
It was Ron that went back to get Margaret. And people believe that Margaret stayed with Ron because she, at this point, was after his money.
I called him, and he says, Margaret's diagramming out how she's going to split up all my money. And he says, I'm really getting nervous. I told him, you better watch your back.
And to add to Ron's worries, at the time, he was knee-deep in a massive real estate development deal that he was struggling to get financing for.
We're up here at the Lee Canyon property that Ron Rudin owned. It's near Mount Charleston. It's about an hour outside of Las Vegas, about 8,000 feet. And Ron had hoped to make a development up here. And apparently, Ron was expecting an offer on this property.
He had several million invested in this project called the Retreat at Lee Canyon.
Lee Canyon is currently a ski resort, but in the 90s, there were questions raised about how Ron was funding his plans for an RV resort at the location.
Ron, at one point, apparently approached some people that were affiliated with organized crime seeking, money to help develop this place.
Well, he got paranoid. The older he got and the worse he was drinking, and he really started getting paranoid.
Maybe he thought an ominous directive he made about his fortune was about to come true.
Ron almost seemed to predict his fate by putting in his will that if I were to ever die of foul play, look at the people around me who stand to benefit from this fortune.
So that tells you something's not quite right. What would make a man have his attorney draw up a directive that says, in the event that I die under any strange circumstances, my death is to be investigated thoroughly?
I think he was frightened.
In December of 1994, Margaret Rudin was really excited about a new antique business that her husband Ron helped her set up.
December 17th was Margaret's grand opening of her new antique store in Ron's strip mall. It was her big opening that weekend.
Ron came because he kind of played host, like, this is my shop, this is my wife. I was excited about it because Ron was happy and being supportive. I thought it was going to all work out and be perfect.
Margaret leaves the grand opening and goes home. She and Ron had a plan to go to a movie, and that didn't work out, so she decides, let's go back to the antique store.
She said she closed the antique store late, very late. She went over to see another tenant and, just to talk and chat.
Margaret claims she went back home at about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Ron's car wasn't there. The burglar alarm wasn't on. And I thought, well, that's strange. I thought, I'm so tired, I'm just gonna go to bed. Maybe he did go meet somebody.
Next morning, Ron's employees get to the real estate office, and there's no sign of Ron Rudin.
Uniformly, all his coworkers and friends said he was in the office every morning, 8 a.m., very dependable. The fact he didn't show up was so unusual.
Ron Rudin is one of these guys who tells people where he is at all times. He is never, ever missing. And now he is.
I knew something he was going to be doing that most people didn't know about. He was selling the Lee Canyon property on Wednesday. So I knew that he might want to see it one last time.
The first thing Margaret did on Monday morning when Ron wasn't home is she called her friend up on the mountain and said, "Have you seen Ron up there?" And Ron used to keep a trailer up here. He would just spend the night in the trailer. And so they searched the whole property and there was no sign of Ron.
She called all the relatives. She sounded very frightened. And she said, "I don't know where Ron is. I don't know what to do. I don't know what's happened to him."
I called missing persons the 19th, and the cop said, "Call us back when it's been 48 hours.
Ron's coworkers and friends were immediately suspicious of Margaret.
I call in the morning, the secretary says, "He didn't come in this morning." I says, "Uh-oh." I turned to my wife. I says, "I think Margaret did something to Ron."
And detectives did a cursory search of the shop and the house. At that time, they didn't find anything that would give them, cause to investigate any further. When the detectives talked to her, she didn't seem to be worried about Ron being missing. She seemed to be more concerned about his finances.
The suspicion only grew after investigators learned about that ominous directive that Ron added to his trust.
Ron wrote in his will that if any of his beneficiaries were involved in his death, either directly or indirectly, that they should receive nothing.
The will that if I die a violent death, take extraordinary means to investigate. So certainly there is a lot of motive there for Margaret.
The police think this was about money, and that Margaret was greedy and she wanted his fortune.
Margaret and the two trustees of Ron's estate were among the beneficiaries. According to Ron's attorney, Ron said Margaret was becoming, quote, vicious and violent. Without naming Margaret specifically, in 1991, Ron executed that secret directive to the trustees. 2 years later, though, things between them seemed to have improved, so Ron increased her share.
Well, he increased it finally, I think it was 60%. And you generally don't give more to people that you're having a problem with.
Because the cops were so focused on Margaret right out of the gate, they may have been overlooking another possible motive in Ron's disappearance, that huge Lee Canyon development project.
Now, this deal that he was working on, he disappeared 2 days before he was due to settle. Well, that's motive.
And so that was one of the theories early on in the case, is that perhaps that dealing, that purchase, was perhaps behind the killing of Ron Rudin.
Ron Rudin is missing for 4 days, and then a huge development.
We heard that they found his Cadillac.
This is the Crazy Horse 2 Gentlemen's Club here in Las Vegas. And the significance of this place is right behind this building is where Ron Rudin's car was found.
Was there anything unusual about the condition of the car when they found it?
Yes, it was backed into space for one thing, and then it was covered with dirt and mud, and like it had been rained on in the dirt. And then inside the vehicle, they found 4 sets of muddy footprints. Ron was very meticulous with his car. He even hired a guy to keep his car clean.
Now, I never believed that Ron had driven the Cadillac to the Topless Club. I always believed that it was placed there by someone that was involved.
There were muddy footprints in the car, and they recovered fingerprints that didn't belong to either Ron or Margaret. It might be an indication that, the car was clean.
Police also find clothing in the trunk. Despite all of these clues, weeks would then go by, and no more leads.
Have you seen this man? He's Ron Rudin, a 64-year-old realtor well known in Las Vegas.
In January of 1995, the trustees of Ron's estate put out a $25,000 reward for information leading to his whereabouts.
And he was gone. No one ever saw him again until he was found.
And a little ways up the hill, they found a bracelet, and it spelled out Ron in like diamonds.
When this happened, it was kind of a big deal.
Okay, here we are about 60 miles southeast of Las Vegas, near Lake Mojave, at a place called Nelson's Landing. And this is where, on January 23rd of 1995, in the middle of the night, some fishermen were walking back up after it started raining, and they walked up in this area.
Well, that was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking, you know, to think of him that way.
So, Greg, what else was found up there?
Okay, well, Ryan, you're standing by where they found Ron's remains, most of them, and then up here was Ron's gold bracelet, and it was unique because it had his name Ron, R-O-N, spelled out in diamonds.
And that bracelet was Ron Rudin. There it was, Ron, written right on it.
They found the burned out old trunk. There was some belts, metal belts that had wrapped around the trunk.
What we believe is the body in the trunk had been placed there.
To tell a story. The skull, the bracelet, the Cadillac, it's all left there intentionally. You know what, it's an old mob movie. They automatically assume when a spouse is killed, the other spouse is guilty. Of course they should have investigated Margaret, but their total focus should not have been on Margaret.
And that trunk they found at the crime scene, they're convinced it came from Margaret's antique shop.
The trunk did become crucial because humpback trunk at the store.
So I'm thinking about Margaret. She's slim, maybe, I don't know, 120 pounds.
Right.
In your mind, would it have been possible for her to dump the body here?
I don't think so. I think it would be difficult for a strong man to do it because you're talking about way up there on the hill and then dragging everything down.
I don't think that Margaret could have loaded the body in a trunk by herself. I think there was someone that helped her.
And they come up with her supposed boyfriend, Yehuda Sharon. So what they do is put both of them under surveillance.
The theory was that Margaret shot him while he slept, and that she called Yehuda and asked him to help.
He had rented his van, and he had taken the back seat out. And therefore the theory was that somehow Margaret got Sharon involved in moving the body.
Sharon's story was he was going to go to his part-time job in California. He ended up turning around and coming back to Las Vegas.
When you look at how much mileage Sharon had put on that rented van, could his story that he went partway to California be true, or did he go to Nelson's Landing? Either's possible.
Yeah, Mr. Sharon had an alibi.
He claimed he had nothing to do with it, and his girlfriend at the time told investigators that she was with him the weekend that Ron was reported missing. It all checked out.
There's no proof of Yehuda's involvement in this. He portrayed this as a witch hunt, you know, that they were out to get Margaret and he got sucked into this.
I have no proof of that. I'm convinced that he had far more knowledge than he let on.
You can see how they looked at things and they tried to fit it in their narrative. Oh, well, she has an antique store. He rented a van. Oh, he must have been involved in it, even though he had an alibi.
Call from a handyman who told a remarkable story.
Augustine Lovato tells investigators how he was hired by Margaret Rudin to clean up their home. That information would actually lead to Augustine Lovato receiving a $25,000 reward. He thought potentially was blood.
When he talked about it, he could hear this gurgling. It's a drain. You put it in, it drains out. You can find blood afterwards, fine, but it's not going to be gurgling 4 days later or an hour later.
Well, it's awfully strange that your missing persons detectives were out here. They didn't see any blood. How did Lovato see something that wasn't there however many days before?
She hired Lovato to remodel the bedroom, but Ron was still just a missing person at that time. It wasn't a homicide case.
He tells police that while Ron was missing, Margaret hired him to make some changes in the house.
I wasn't renovating the house. I knew I was going to need a way to make a living if he didn't come back, so that I could support myself. I decided I could open a tea shop that I had already talked to Ron about, and everything in there was going to be antiques that I could sell. I wish I'd have been able to do it. It would have been a success. The trustees had left me with no choice.
They cut off Margaret's money. She was getting a small paycheck from Ron's business. They cut that off.
The trustees named in Ron's will justify it by saying they're simply carrying out Ron's specific directive that no one gets any money who caused his death by violent means.
It was really, really petty. After Ron's disappearance, they immediately took over the trust. By New Year's Eve, they had already cut me out of everything. I no longer have my shop in Ron's property, so they were letting me have a message. They were in control, and they intended to make me penniless, and they succeeded.
There's no forensics that ever puts Margaret.
Piece of physical evidence that investigators desperately need miraculously shows up.
It's 1 year after Ron's death, and Margaret is fighting two big battles. One, the trustees of her husband's estate, his $12 million estate, are keeping her from getting any money. Secondly, she's under suspicion for murder.
And she's just being bled dry. I mean, she's got no income. They're trashing her name everywhere.
The newspapers even were saying, first time a murder case is going to be settled in a civil trial against Margaret Rudin.
It was right before she was to testify. From a criminal perspective, we were really looking forward to her testimony. That was going to be very, very telling.
If the trustees can convince the civil courts that she, Margaret, in fact is responsible for the death of her husband, she will not be entitled to any of the $12 million.
Ron trusted me. He wanted me to have a part of the inheritance because each time that he redid his trust, he increased my percentage by 20%. He would not have kept increasing the percentage if he had any doubts about me whatsoever, or if we had a bad marriage. He wouldn't have.
The battle ends up just basically fizzling out. Margaret ends up settling for $600,000. And if you take out the $429,000 that she owes her attorneys, far cry from the millions that she was set to inherit if indeed he had died of natural causes or she wasn't under any suspicion.
This was a very tricky investigation, and the police struggled for a long time to discern exactly how Ron was murdered. And they suspected he'd been shot while he was sleeping, but they never had the murder weapon.
This lake has changed a lot since 1994 when Ron disappeared. And out here is where they found the gun. This is Lake Mead, and this is Pyramid Island. July 21st of 1996, scuba divers used to have scuba schools here. And so one day, some scuba divers noticed some debris 10 to 15 feet out from the shore. They swam down there and brought it out, and it was a .22 caliber gun with a built-in silencer, and it was wrapped.
It to police.
Now here's the thing. The gun sat in police storage for about a year.
It's now 1997, 2 years after the murder of Ron Rudin. There is still no indictment against Margaret. One of the detectives remembers, we need to look at that gun found in Lake Mead.
In the actual crime scene itself.
The problem with that is they can't connect the murder weapon to Margaret. They can't ever put the gun in Margaret's hand.
Doesn't stop investigators from trying to do so. Ron had actually sent a letter to police saying, hey, one of my guns from my gun collection is missing. But what it did do was lead police to believe that it must have been Margaret who took that gun that was then missing.
Ron had left a report, with ATF indicating that that gun had turned up missing about the time that he and Margaret had separated.
I think it's a stretch to argue that
He had at least 1,000 guns in there. Thomas machine guns from the 30s, shelves that were at angles so you could see every single one of them clearly in view.
Was the firearm recovered at the bottom of Lake Mead that pushed this thing over the edge?
Ron's car found at the Crazy Horse, the trunk found in the desert, the handyman story, none of it was enough to indict Margaret Rudin. But now there's a gun, and it's a gun they believe was the one used to kill Ron, taken by Margaret.
Now they have what they've been trying to get for years.
I think with that, that was the piece that they felt that they needed to go to a grand jury. We found the gun. And then 3 years after the disappearance of Mr. Rudin, Margaret is indicted.
Here comes the interesting part now. They called Margaret's attorney, and they said, hey, guess what? We got a murder warrant for Margaret, and we need her to turn herself in. And the attorney promptly said, I don't know where she is. She's disappeared.
We thought, no.
Police were flabbergasted.
sometime toward the end of March of 1997, Margaret finally got fed up with everything. She was running out of money, couldn't get a job because she was the Black Widow of Las Vegas. Well, she left before she was ever indicted, and there's no crime about leaving and going anywhere if you're not under indictment.
Margaret got scared. She could tell it wasn't going in a good direction for her.
At that time, I think I was so ready for a nervous breakdown, I didn't think that far ahead. Just wanted to get out of there.
She went on the lam.
You spot Margaret Rudin, call our hotline.
She outsmarted all of them. She knew how to stay alive.
And if I told you what happened next, you wouldn't believe it.
They automatically assume when the spouse is killed, the other spouse is guilty. Love makes the world go round, but money greases the wheel.
There's no sign of Ron Rudin.
And he was gone.
Margaret Rudin, dubbed the Black Widow of Las Vegas.
The Nevada Black Widow.
They never checked on anyone but me.
You spot Margaret Rudin, call our hotline of 1-800-CRIME-TV.
She had at least 2, if not 3 wigs. And then we came across several IDs.
She went on the lam. She outsmarted all of them.
I mean, how often could you be that lucky?
Margaret just doesn't know that luck is going to run out.
42 years. That is the worst trial that I've ever had.
You were wrong doing that. It's unfair to Mrs. Rudin, Judge. Listen to me.
They had no evidence. They had no witnesses.
There's no fingerprints, DNA, no forensics.
It was a circus.
My right side. Whole body would have to go this way. I made a ruling and it sticks.
This was just a travesty of justice, and I was part of that travesty. And it's the biggest regret of my life. It really is.
Sometimes what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Sometimes it goes on the run.
Why would you flee if you were innocent?
Guadalajara is a city in western Mexico known for its tequila and its mariachi music. Its historic center is dotted with plazas and beautiful landmarks. In 1997, a middle-aged woman in a dark wig was seen frequenting the old Colonial Plaza. That woman,
1994.
Police instantly zero in on Margaret. They believe they've got a solid case. But it's only after police finally have what they believe to be is the murder weapon are they able to charge Margaret Rudin with murder.
Everything that had gone wrong, the way it was handled by the police and the prosecutors, and I got really scared. I did not feel comfortable anymore because they can do whatever they want to do with somebody's life. I wasn't going to get a chance to prove myself.
She did call me and say they think that I did it. She always said she did not do it. She never admitted that I know of that she was guilty, and she ran.
When Margaret fled, it cemented public opinion, right? People thought she was guilty, right? Why would you flee if you were innocent?
I left for, I thought, a better life than what I had in Vegas. I wanted peace of mind. Mexico, they don't care where you're from. They don't pay attention to you.
Once Margaret ends up in Guadalajara, she finds an apartment in a building with mostly other Americans, and she sort of works into the fabric of the downtown atmosphere of this Mexican city.
I love Mexico. I like their way of life. Nobody knew me. And I thought, this is a good place to live.
Meanwhile, back in the U.S., Margaret may have been gone, but she was not forgotten. She was on the FBI's most wanted list.
This is going to be a true test for Margaret Rudin. 53 years old, no criminal record. She has to figure out how to survive life on the run.
I don't know how she did it. I really don't.
Well, one would think she had help, or that she had studied it very, very closely.
One useful tool that Margaret has always possessed is her charm. Men do like her. So what happens next is practically the making of a movie of the week. She meets a guy who claims to be a Spanish bank robber, also on the run.
Oh, it was great. He was a wonderful companion. He was not my boyfriend. He taught me how to be a fugitive. The number one thing is always have a bag packed. Have money, ID, clothes. Make sure you have whatever it is you need the most in that bag.
Margaret becomes this master of disguise, with different aliases, wearing different wigs. She even had colored contacts. But eventually, she decided she was ready to come back to the U.S.
Life on the run's not what it's cracked up to be, right? It's a tough existence. You want to live in Mexico under an alias, scrapping it out, or will you take your chances coming back to the United States?
I had friends that came to visit me in Mexico, and then they asked me if I wanted to come back and live with them in Phoenix. Once you have children and grandchildren, you cannot go somewhere else and live and act like you're having a normal life.
Margaret has to figure out a way to safely get back into the United States. So once again, she uses her charm and convinces a gentleman who lives in the same apartment building in Guadalajara to help her.
Joe Lundergan was a Boston fireman, retired. Very, very, very needy. He was never my boyfriend. I have never been that desperate in my life. I said, I've decided I'm going back to the States. And he said, I will get you across the border. We got to the border where you're on U.S. territory. And I said, oh, okay, go. You can both go.
Margaret and Joe Lundergan part ways. He heads back home to the Boston area, and she settles into a new life in Phoenix, assuming yet another identity using the name of her friend.
Margaret is in Phoenix. She's gotten herself a room at the YMCA. She once worked in the hotel business. So that's a bit of a resume, and she uses it to get a job at the San Carlos Hotel.
My poor manager, he used to say, if you ever tell me you're going to quit, I'll kill you. And I knew I was going to have to quit at some point.
Margaret was the subject of as high-profile a case as you'll ever get.
What could drive a woman to murder? Love? Sex? Money? Well, for the woman in our next case, you're going to have to answer that question yourself.
And she was repeatedly on America's Most Wanted. And she was the Black Widow, right? This was the label. Where's the Black Widow? Have you seen Margaret Rudin?
You spot Margaret Rudin, call our hotline at 1-800-CRIME-TV.
Someone that she worked with saw the America's Most Wanted and said, hey, that's Annette, and she called the tip line and the police officers responded.
So the cops showed up at my door and said, somebody thinks you are so-and-so and we need to see your ID. And I had gone the day before and got legit Arizona ID with my picture on it, you know. And They said, let me check it in the computer. Came back and said, nothing there. So they left. I picked up my bag, called a limo service, which we used at the hotel, and I said, would you please pick me up on the side entrance? So the limo took me to where I wanted to go, and I was a fugitive again. It is funny. I mean, how often could you be that lucky?
It's time for another chapter in Margaret's life on the run, and she heads east.
But then a pizza delivery man shows up at Margaret Rudin's door. Is he there to deliver an end to her lucky streak?
Revere, Massachusetts is a community that's just 6 miles north of Boston.
It's a blue-collar community, very diverse, and with USA's oldest beach is Revere Beach.
This area was kind of known as the Boston mob community. But this is where they operated, in that general vicinity.
No one asked many questions in Revere.
Margaret barely makes it out of Phoenix when she hears from a friend that Joe Lundigan needs her help.
And Joe said, I have 2 knee surgeries and hip surgery. And would you ask Margaret if she would come take care of me?
Margaret is able to, in Revere, carve out a new life on the run.
Margaret lived in a kind of a rundown little apartment. You had to walk up 2 or 3 flights of stairs. It was kind of grimy and dirty and dark. It was so different than her life of luxury in Las Vegas.
Her new name is Lee Brown.
The other one was Susan Simmons, and she had at least 2, if not 3 wigs, and she wore them frequently.
You know, it wasn't to be deceptive in any way, it's just my sense of style.
People of Revere, they all liked Margaret, right? She was real popular.
I first met Margaret back in October of '99. I'd do photocopies for her. Then she would bring me in some IDs, and I would laminate them for her. And she was very pleasant, really nice.
I really like Massachusetts. I like the people. They're very honest and sincere and forthright.
Even on the run, for Margaret, there's always time for romance. Turns out Margaret's got a new boyfriend. He's a younger guy who lives in the same building as Margaret, but 1 floor down.
The idea that she is the focus of an international woman hunt.
You spot Margaret Rudin, call our hotline of 1-800-CRIME-TV.
But then also live a somewhat normal life is uncanny.
But when you're on the lam, it's the little things that get you. One of Margaret's seemingly mundane activities proves to be her undoing. She goes frequently to the Revere post office.
And they got a tip, hey, this woman looks like the fugitive that's being broadcast on America's Most Wanted.
They got a tip that Margaret Rudin was in fact mailing packages from a Revere post office. So we immediately went over to the post office and showed her picture. Post office people said, yeah, that's her. That's her, and she lives right over there.
And that's how they found me.
November 5th, 1999. The team got together and decided to position ourselves around here.
They came up with kind of a unique sting operation to pry her out, which was a law enforcement officer posed as a pizza delivery man.
We had Officer Joe Peppett on a Domino's shirt, a Domino's hat. We all went up the stairs, gained peaceful entry, filed up the stairs to her apartment, which is on the 2nd floor, and proceeded to knock on the door.
When they said, pizza man, and I went to Joe's bedroom and I said, answer the door.
And as soon as the door opened, we rushed in, and the first person I came to was Mr. Lundigan. pat him down really quickly, shifted him and passed him to the next guy.
They came in like gangbusters. They're coming down this narrow hallway, and they're coming in with their guns drawn.
There's a entrance to a bathroom. We open the door, and we see a female in there.
All I did was step back into the door of the bathroom. And immediately, he was a highway patrolman. He was a wonderful young man. He came in, and he said, "Are you Margaret Rudin?" I said, "Of course I am. You know I am."
I said to her, "You know what this is about, Margaret?" She goes, "Yeah, this is about Las Vegas." At that point, she was placed in handcuffs with no issues whatsoever. This would be a good example of how she looked upon her arrest. And then she had all her things scattered all over the room, to include wigs. And then we came across several IDs. She took deliberate, proactive measures to conceal her identity.
People of Revere were absolutely stunned beyond belief when it came out that she was wanted for murder in Las Vegas.
This doesn't jive with the person that I knew. The pleasantness of her, that's not something that you could hide. I don't know, I tend to have my doubts.
Margaret Rudin's run from the law ended in Revere, indicted more than 2 years ago for the 1994 murder of her husband, Las Vegas realtor Ron Rudin.
Now that she's caught, she's the focus of everybody's attention.
Margaret Rudin's fugitive days were over, but not her efforts to escape justice.
And they're bringing her from Massachusetts back to Las Vegas.
It sells papers. It keeps the hoopla going.
This is what Margaret Rudin looked like when corrections officers booked her Sunday morning.
They convict somebody before they're ever setting foot into a courtroom.
And now all this anticipation is building as day one in the courtroom is on the horizon.
You would be relieved, to find out if in fact she really did it, and we would find out in court, and we could see it whenever we wanted to.
There's a lot here at stake. Margaret's life is at stake.
But would Margaret's fate hinge on the testimony of a surprising witness for the prosecution? Her own sister.
What did Margaret respond?
She said, "I don't give a."
When you think of Las Vegas, you think of all that sizzle on the Strip. Now it's all moved to the Clark County Courthouse, where Margaret Rudin is about to face trial for murder.
March 2nd, 2001, it is time for the Rudin trial.
Adding to the drama inside the courtroom, this trial would make its way into living rooms across America. It was put on cable television.
Good morning and welcome to Open Court here on Court TV.
I think this was the first trial to go gavel to gavel on Court TV.
State of Nevada versus Margaret Rudin.
The world is watching as this woman who has been on the run, accused of murder, is now sitting in the defendant's chair.
I did not know the magnitude until trial started.
There's a lot riding on the case, and I remember really feeling the weight of that case.
I've never talked about the Margaret Rudin case.
The state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
They hand me the file, and he says, "This is going to be a tough one."
Mr. Owens.
In opening statements, the prosecution portrays Margaret to the jury as a ruthless, greedy woman who will do anything to get her husband's millions.
The evidence will show at the time of Ronald Rudin's death, Margaret Rudin was a 60% beneficiary of the properties and assets that were in that trust.
And in comes Michael Amador.
All right, Mr. Amador.
In his opening statement, defense attorney Michael Amador raises a lot of eyebrows when he seems more intent on talking about himself rather than his client.
I could be a wonderful, caring father, coaching soccer and basketball and helping kids with homework and doing all those things.
It was hours of rambling and talking about himself.
This is a great day for me. This is a culmination of a career.
The purpose of an opening statement is just to indicate what the evidence is going to tend to show and not go into your personal beliefs and your passion and your soccer dad. I never heard that in an opening statement in my life.
I remember minutes into the opening statement of the defense saying to my co-counsel, hey, give me a cigarette, this thing's over. And I don't smoke.
Things started out bad and they went to worse by the first day.
Prosecutors lay out their case that Margaret shot
the place for what?
What type of a scene was this?
Suicide.
And could you tell the jury where that was?
In the bedroom.
In the middle of the trial, this astounding revelation comes to light when the jurors learned that Ron Rudin's third wife, Peggy, had actually shot herself in the head.
Reported to the ATF that the gun went missing from his collection back in 1988, right at the time that Margaret was moving out of the house.
A year into the marriage when they were having the divorce problems.
That gun had turned up missing about the time that he and Margaret had separated, and he believed that she had taken the gun.
If she somehow is so clever that she's kept this gun under lock and key, such that no one knows where it is, she brings it out right to the place where it could be found. And that's what you have to believe beyond a reasonable doubt.
One of the major pieces that the state honed in on was to Margaret Rudin.
And to help make that connection, the prosecution calls Bruce Honeback. He's an antiques dealer who claimed he sold the trunk to Margaret.
Can you tell me when it was that you sold this particular trunk to Margaret Rudin?
At the very beginning of our relationship.
So, late spring, early summer?
Yes, sir.
Of 1994?
Yes, sir.
Investigators always believed that Margaret had helped transporting that trunk, and they pointed the finger at her suspected paramour, Yehuda Sharon. In what looks to be a major nail in the proverbial coffin of Margaret's case, Yehuda Sharon is called to the stand as a prosecution witness.
Yehuda, okay, check this out. They told him, we're going to charge you with the same murder that we're charging her with. However, if you flip, we'll give you total immunity. Now, what's up with that?
I know that I received immunity. From what, I have no idea.
Did you kill Ron Rudin?
No, I did not.
Did you help kill Ron Rudin?
No, I did not.
Did you help dispose of his body?
No, I did not.
Did you go up to Nelson's Landing in December of 1994?
No, I did not.
It still baffles me to this day. How do you give him immunity and you don't know what he's going to testify to?
No charges were ever brought against Sharon.
It turns out that the attempt to get something out of Yehuda Sharon just fizzled. The prosecution now puts a lot of its hopes on the next witness, Margaret's sister Donna.
Why is it that you testify as you have today?
Because it's the truth. Because I felt it's what I had to do.
Donna wasn't my friend. She never had been my friend. She's very difficult, and I don't trust her any further than I can throw her.
Donna testified about how she helped Margaret take financial documents from Ron's desk.
Donna's not finished. She tells the jury that the day after Ron went missing, Margaret said to her, you know, I talked to the police about Ron in the past tense.
I said, I hope that doesn't mean that you know something.
And what did Margaret respond?
She said, I don't give a...
And the surprises and curveballs just keep coming. Early in the trial, Amador drops this bombshell.
The problem here is not a lack of diligence on the part of myself and my staff, but insufficient time to fully prepare the entire case, or the time and the funds to fully investigate and interview all of the witnesses. The issue is Margaret Rudin's right to a fair trial.
Astoundingly, Michael Amador, the defense attorney, asks the judge to declare a mistrial.
I will also be moving to withdraw as attorney of record on behalf of Margaret Rudin.
Michael Amador wasn't who he said he was. One thing that I've learned over the years, you better have a voice because you can't depend on somebody else.
The trial is not a perfect thing. Ms. Rudin has not been denied her rights under the Constitution. Based upon the foregoing, the motion for mistrial is denied.
But the closing act of this three-ring circus of a trial was yet to come. Tom Pitaro takes over as lead defense attorney, and he pulls a stunt that will make jaws drop in the courtroom again.
So you have to go shoot here, either bang, bang, 1 or 2 times, correct?
Yes.
Bang, bang.
I sort of blew up on that.
I made a ruling and it sticks.
The jury in this case has seen all kinds of craziness, and it's not over yet. Now the defense wants to recreate the actual crime scene in the middle of the courtroom.
So the whole body would have to go this way to get the head now facing the back.
Well, the idea was to demonstrate to the jurors.
Listen to me. You better not start yelling, Mr. Patero. I made a ruling and it sticks.
At all. I sort of blew up on that. I says, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It was a circus.
Well, yeah, you know, he got upset a few times. But that's what he gets paid for.
After over 9 weeks, the prosecution and the defense finally rest in one of the longest trials in Vegas history, sending jurors off to deliberate.
The real nasty, down-and-out fight doesn't happen in the courtroom. The real fight starts in the jury room.
I'm Ron Vest. I was the foreman on the Ron Rudin millionaire murder trial.
Ron Vest, yeah. Very overbearing, but he was very angry because he actually felt on that first day of deliberation that he'd be home by dinner. According to Ron, this case was a slam dunk, and it really wasn't.
This thing was a slam dunk with a stepladder. I mean, it just was. And when you start adding up who had the means, who had the motive, who had the opportunity to do it, there's only one person. And then we had the lone holdout. She couldn't point to evidence as to why Margaret didn't.
There's your reasonable doubt. We went through 6 days of deliberation where I was not budging.
The foreman wanted me to dismiss juror number 11 because she was the only holdout. And I said, no, her actions weren't such that she needs to be excused. And if it's going to be a hung jury, so be it.
Ms. Rudin, will you stand up, please? Have you arrived at a verdict?
Yes, sir, we have.
It was a packed courtroom. Cameras were rolling.
There was a lot of suspense because the jury had been out for quite a while.
Oh, it's tense. It was really tense.
I can remember standing up and reading the charges, and then I said on the count 2, on the murder count in the first degree, we find the defendant. And I can remember pausing briefly and symbolically. We find the defendant guilty.
When the verdict was read, you hear somebody sobbing. That was me. Because I caved. And all I could do was look up at Tom Patero and Margaret Rudin and mouth, I'm sorry. I'm very ashamed of myself that I let that happen. It's the biggest regret of my life. It really is.
When they came back saying guilty of all counts, I was surprised. I was surprised at that. You know, juror number 11 should have stuck to her guns.
When she came out guilty, you know, we were all relieved, you know, that she was going to go to prison.
Margaret Rudin was looking at me when I said guilty, because I know she did it. And she didn't even blink.
It was a blackout. It's sort of like when the cops came to tell me about Ron, and then your mind goes, I can't take anymore. I don't know how to take it.
The court sentences you to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole.
None of this ever had to happen. What no one really knew at the time, except for a handful of people, was that Margaret Rudin was offered plea deals multiple times.
There had been so many issues with regards to the trial itself that we were concerned about, you know, what would happen with appeals.
They, being the prosecution, were going to give her credit for time served.
I think I even told her, I said, so you do another year and a half, and you'd be out of custody. She didn't hesitate one bit. Oh, no, Judge, I'm innocent. I'm not taking any deal. I can't plead to something I didn't do.
5 times I was offered a plea deal. I never considered, I'm not going to admit it. I don't care if I'm 110 and I'm still waiting. I'm not going to admit to something I didn't do.
And that takes a lot of chutzpah.
Even afterwards, one of the prosecutors came up to me and said, you know, I'll still give it to you.
Dumbfounded that she rejected the offer.
Okay, then. Maybe she is innocent.
Wow, Margaret. I honestly don't know what to say to that. I really don't. That's unbelievable.
She went out to the Florence McClure prison out on the Smiley Road. It's on the outskirts of Las Vegas.
Smiley Road. Who would put a women's prison on Smiley Road? What a sense of humor.
She wasn't being broken by the system. She had a belief that she was going to get through it.
It hardens you. You know, the only way you can bear a lot of the things is you have to only think about what's good still.
One person who reached out to Margaret in prison was holdout juror Corinne Kovacs. She had befriended and written Margaret during her long prison stint.
The catalyst for me was I needed to personally apologize to this woman for what I felt was my fault. Well, you know, the travesty was my fault.
As the years went by, there were lingering questions of whether or not she actually got a fair trial.
This was a show. I mean, it was just terrible. And could she have received a fairer trial? Yeah, she could have received a fairer trial and better defense counsel, but what do you do?
42 years. That is the worst trial that I've ever had. The only regret I have, should I have allowed a mistrial in the very beginning because of Mike Amador? It might have had a different outcome for Margaret Rudin.
But now, 20 years after her conviction, could unsolved mysteries about Ron Rudin's death finally lead to Margaret's name being cleared?
There was 4 sets of footprints, muddy footprints in the car. They never established whose footprints they are. There's all sorts of questions, and who are the 4 people in that car?
This case is still pending. I don't know if you know that. Tune in for the next chapter.
She wants to prove she did not do it. Wow.
Even behind bars, Margaret Rudin was insistent she was innocent. She files an appeal to have her conviction.
And she said, yeah, as ineffective as this is the counsel, I'm going to grant this and grant a new trial. Well, there you go.
But then 2 years later, the Nevada Supreme Court reversed that decision over a legal technicality.
I was just looking at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals website and saw one that involved a murder in Las Vegas, and I thought, well, that looks kind of interesting. I just started getting mad, and I started reading it over again because I couldn't believe it. So I went out there and met her, and then I agreed to represent her if she got a new trial.
There's no fingerprints, DNA, no forensics that puts her at the crime scene. She's not stupid enough to kill Ron Rudin in the bedroom of their home, put him in a trunk from her antique store, haul him out and burn him and leave him.
I would really like to be able to exonerate my name. Yes, I have the energy to sit through another trial. Innocent. I would be proven innocent.
Margaret appealed again, and the case is currently pending, waiting for a federal judge to make a ruling on whether she gets a new trial.
Why are you convinced that she didn't do it?
Because the physical evidence just doesn't add up. They didn't have a strong enough lead defense attorney to challenge all the evidence that was admitted.
Margaret had taken the gun and used it to kill him.
She had an opportunity to take the weapon in '88, and she probably just kept possession of it for all those years.
Or taken by person or persons unknown during my wife's packing her furniture and
Justified, he sold the trunk to Margaret.
Can you tell me when it was that you sold this particular trunk to Margaret Rudin?
Right at the very beginning of our, at the very beginning of our relationship.
So here we got a guy that supposedly sold her the trunk. To me, that was one of the bigger factors in the conviction.
It turns out that the guy who originally sold the witness that trunk came.
He's like, we carry roller skates in. He said, that's it. And I said, Bruce, that little case is too small to put a cadaver in.
But the jury didn't hear from that man until after the defense had rested. Mullinax contends by that time what he had to say was ineffective.
We didn't know it at the time. That's where the problems were. We were finding facts out as they were coming, and as an attorney, you know the facts, and you're able to defend against them. Quite truthfully, if we had that testimony at Vint, they never would have spent all the time talking about trunks.
Mysteries surrounding Ron's murder that remain unanswered a quarter of a century later, including the riddle of what was found inside Ron Ruden's abandoned Cadillac.
There was 4 sets of footprints, muddy footprints in the car. They never established whose footprints they are. They also found clothes in the trunk of the car. Those clothes were never tested for DNA. Instead of
Still got to have the proof somewhere. Bring it out. Let's have it under DNA standards today.
Even former prosecutor Gary Guyman says that there were investigative avenues that weren't fully pursued, like that huge Lee Canyon real estate deal Rudin was working on that was set to close just days after he went missing.
Yeah, I always believed there was fodder in the Lee Canyon business dealings, but it never got developed. And there's just seems like there's so much left in the process.
He was involved with some very wide assortment of not so nice people. And when they found a body out there at the lake, I mean, for me, that just kind of has mob written all over it.
I just hope that the court in Las Vegas would order a new trial and that this matter could be settled. The chances, I don't know. It's up to a judge right now.
Okay, but this is Vegas. Would you say the odds are in your favor?
I would say the odds should be in our favor because, remember, Margaret was granted a new trial back in 2008.
Infamous convicted killer Margaret Rudin, dubbed the Black Widow of Las Vegas, has just been let out of prison.
Margaret Rudin's life is about to change drastically. What lies ahead does not involve handcuffs, bars, or prison guards.
Oh my God, more than one time did I say to her on the phone, "You're going to get out, and the day you are, I'm going to be there."
Juror Corinne Kovacs. She had befriended and written Margaret during her long prison stint.
Wow. Hi. Am I going to get to see you later?
That was wonderful. It was high time, but you could see that being in prison took a toll, because this was she's a very pretty woman.
After her release, Margaret moved back to the Chicago area. Now she's 77 years old.
The world had changed, life had changed, my children had changed. I'm living alone for the first time probably in my life. It's a serious adjustment. I knew nothing about Facebook or smartphones or computers or the way of life that's just so taken for granted now.
She's a great-grandmother now. She's spending time with her daughter, her granddaughter, great-granddaughters.
And now if I had my life to live over again, I would stay right here in Illinois and never, ever have subjected my kids or myself to Vegas, all of the things that influenced my life as I got into the relationship with Ron Rudin. I miss him. I look at the pictures now and think I wish he was here.
I wish I had had more pictures with my husband.
I think because of the details of the murder, how heinous it was, and because it was motivated by money, by greed, that personally I think she should have stayed behind bars.
I did not kill Ron. And I have no fear of meeting God and saying, I did not. I'm not going to have my children or my grandchildren live with that. Look at her. Her mother did it. I don't care what you think. I don't care what you think. I don't care what you think. God and I know.
A small city in the Midwestern hub of the Rust Belt. Homemaker Diane Spice lives 5 miles north in the sleepy suburb of Blackman Township.
It was a normal, regular day, and the phone rang at early. It was like 10 minutes to 8.
The call is about Diane's niece, Amber.
It was Amber's boss telling me that she had not been to work for 2 days.
32-year-old Amber Gerwick works as an administrative assistant at a local consulting firm.
Amber worked for a company that contracted with Homeland Security. She enjoyed her job. She had just gotten a promotion, was really happy about that.
She was really excited. She was going from working in a cubicle to having an office of her own.
But it isn't just work that keeps Amber busy.
She was taking a medical administration course part-time at school, working full-time.
She was maintaining a 4.0 average while taking care of a family.
Amber has 4 children. She and her ex-husband share custody. Amber was at a good place in her life.
To Diane, her niece's sudden absence from work seems out of character.
For her not to show up for 2 days without calling in was very unusual. So I thought, well, maybe she's sick.
Amber has recently moved to a 1-bedroom apartment a few minutes from her Aunt Diane's home. Diane decides to check in on her. But she's greeted by nothing but a cold silence.
I knocked on the door pretty loudly, as loud as I could. I pounded on it for a few minutes, and I listened in to see if I could hear any sounds, but there was nothing.
Minutes later, Diane breaks the troubling news to Amber's mother, Jackie Seeger.
She asked if we had heard anything from Amber recently, and I said, well, we talked to her Saturday.
Jackie and her husband Dale speak with their daughter regularly.
Amber lives in Michigan and I live in Georgia, and that's a long ways away. So in order to stay in touch, Amber and I talked to one another on the phone.
On April 9th, 2 days earlier, Amber was her usual talkative self.
She said that the kids were with their father that weekend and that she was going to study for the day.
But Amber never mentioned plans to miss work. Immediately concerned, Jackie tries her daughter's cell phone.
There was no answer whatsoever, just would go to her voicemail.
We decided at that point there needed to be a missing persons report filed.
Diane files a report with the Blackman Township Department of Public Safety.
Well, the next step was, of course, going to her apartment and searching. We felt it was important to check and make sure that she wasn't physically injured and laying in the apartment or worse.
Within the hour, patrol officers arrive at Amber's apartment. But Amber is nowhere to be found.
The police had crime scene investigative people there searching the apartment. They had called the detectives at that point.
Leading the investigation is veteran detective Robert Schrock.
As we entered, we made contact with the patrol officers that were on scene.
At first glance, nothing appears out of the ordinary.
There was no sign of like a struggle or altercation. The apartment wasn't in any type of disarray. There was food in the fridge. She also didn't appear to have packed any clothes. All indicators that she probably wasn't going somewhere for long.
But then, one item suddenly catches his attention.
Amber's purse was sitting by the door. Missing from the purse was her wallet, keys to the vehicle, and the vehicle was not at the apartment.
The evidence found in the apartment leads police to believe that Amber had left willingly. Until Detective Schrock reaches the bedroom at the end of the hall.
As I walked into the bedroom, I located a cell phone sitting on the bed. And the cell phone was still on.
A laptop and various school books are also strewn across the bed.
So it looked like she just got up and took off.
The objects left behind in the bedroom raise a new level of concern.
It made it more suspicious because most people won't leave their cell phone.
We were completely mystified. We did not know what could have caused her to leave the apartment without her cell phone, because it was attached to her like, you know, it was part of her skin.
Detective Schrock begins to piece together possible scenarios.
It's one of two things. It's either Amber didn't want to be contacted, or somebody got a hold of her.
Did somebody break in? Did somebody get into the apartment And did somebody take her forcefully?
But who would want to harm Amber Gerwick? Police speak with a number of friends and acquaintances, including Amber's ex-husband, but no one stands out as a suspect. However, down in Georgia, the Seegers are convinced their daughter would never disappear under normal circumstances.
When she walked out of that apartment, we're thinking there's something wrong.
Amber never would have left her children, just up and left her children.
Amber's career in security contracting gives her access to an inventory of sensitive government information. Her family wonders if Amber's disappearance is somehow connected to her job.
She probably would have known a number of things that could have been important to somebody that was maybe a terrorist or something.
Imagination goes wild. You can think of so many different things that could be going on, so many whys and so many what ifs.
The clues found in Amber's apartment in Michigan leave the family with a host of agonizing questions. But none points police towards an answer.
It was important to get going on this because the last time anyone had spoke to her was on the 9th. A couple days had already gone by, so we were already behind on trying to figure out what had happened.
When Detective Schrock returns to the station, he enters Amber into the National Crime Information Center, or NCIC. The system will raise a red flag if Amber or her vehicle appear on police radar for any reason.
At that point, we were kind of in this limbo. Like, what do we do?
We are sitting here in Georgia. She's missing in Michigan. You know, who do we contact? Who do we talk to? Where do we turn for help?
Then, only 3 hours later, the case takes a startling turn.
And then suddenly we get this call that the car turned up in Georgia as an abandoned car in Tunnel Hill.
I remember having to have that repeated to me because I must have heard it wrong. Her car couldn't have been in Tunnel Hill, Georgia.
And here's her car, 600 miles away from Jackson, where she lives. And we're like, now what?
Coming up, police uncover a puzzling new clue.
I saw the video and I just literally could not breathe.
Missing from her home in Jackson, Michigan. But just 3 hours after her family filed a missing persons report, Amber's car turned up in the parking lot of a Dollar General store in Georgia, over 600 miles from Jackson.
And everything changed. The search had suddenly moved from Michigan to Georgia.
What's most perplexing is not the SUV's distance from Amber's home in Jackson, but rather its proximity to her parents' home in Calhoun.
That's about 35 miles north of us. It's way off the highway. It's just kind of an out-of-the-way place.
According to Tunnel Hill Police, the SUV was abandoned in the parking lot at least 2 days earlier.
Did she drive the car down here? Did someone force her to drive the car down? Did someone do something to her and then take her car?
One day after Amber is reported missing, the case is turned over to Detective Eric Burnett of the Whitfield County Sheriff's Department in Georgia. Detective Burnett invites the Seegers down to the station to discuss some new developments in the case.
I met with Miss Gerwick's parents the first time at my office, the sheriff's office. Asked them about their daughter, what kind of a person she was, what kind of friends she has. I told them what we'd found in the car.
He said initially there appeared to be no signs of a struggle inside of the vehicle. There was no signs of violence. There was no blood evidence.
However, what police did find in the front seat of Amber's car raises a slew of new questions.
Miss Gerwick's wallet was located in the car. There was no money there. It was just a debit card and her driver's license.
Police also found Amber's keys locked inside the SUV.
That was very strange to me.
If Amber drove the car, Why would she leave her most important possessions behind? But then, if Amber were abducted, why would the kidnapper leave her possessions out in the open?
We ran all kind of scenarios of what might have happened to her. But the more we did that, the more confused we got. Is she running from anybody? Has someone done something to her? Those are questions that we needed to have answers for pretty quick.
There had to be something wrong for her to lock her billfold and her keys in. And the only thought that goes through my mind was she did that deliberately so somebody would know that she had been there, like leaving the breadcrumb trail.
Then, Detective Burnett reveals the most valuable piece of evidence found in the SUV, a small paper receipt. The receipt lists a number of purchases made at the Dollar General store. But since the receipt was locked inside Amber's SUV, whoever was driving the car must have been a customer at the store. And chances are, this person was caught on one of the Dollar General's many surveillance cameras.
Based on the receipt, we knew the time and a date of where to look. We wanted to see exactly who was in that store. We went to the Dollar General store and met with the manager at the store to watch the video.
Detective Burnett cues the footage up to Sunday, April 10th at 8:04 a.m., the time stamped on the receipt. What it reveals will turn the investigation on its head.
This is a surveillance video. It showed a female in there buying several items and leaving the store. She was a white female. She had a University of Kentucky blue sweatshirt on, blue jeans and tennis shoes.
I saw the video and I just literally could not breathe. Looked at the monitor and there's my daughter.
It was her. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind it was her, and it stopped me dead in my tracks.
You see her come in. She walks around. She picks up her items. She stops at the checkout. Guy comes to check her out. She kind of says hello to him. She picks up a chapstick or something right there by the cash register, pays for her stuff.
And she turned to the left and she just disappeared.
Amber's appearance on video ends here. There are no surveillance cameras in the Dollar General parking lot.
That's it. That's all we have. We have no way to know what happened when she left the store.
We watched it over and over. I just wanted to reach out and touch her. I just wanted to say, where are you, Amber?
The footage leaves the Seegers with more questions than answers.
She hasn't contacted us. She hasn't attempted to contact us. And why not? Where is she?
Never did I feel that Amber had got to Georgia willfully. I don't know why, how, but I know it's not of her own accord.
She looked up at the camera. She looks right at the surveillance camera, and we're like, okay, were we supposed to notice that? Was she trying to tell us something?
All theories aside, the Seegers must accept a painful reality. Over 3 days have passed since Amber was last seen alive.
It's like the big abyss of the unknown right before you.
My baby girl has been there, and I feel stronger now than ever before that she's in harm's way, and I can't help her.
Coming up, as the search effort expands, police turn their attention to a murky swamp in Tunnel Hill.
Dad and I both felt that this was going to end badly.
Amber Gerwig has not been heard from for 4 days. Georgia police spotted her on surveillance footage from a convenience store in the small town of Tunnel Hill, Georgia, over 600 miles from her home in Michigan. Oddly, it's just under 30 miles from her parents' house. But Amber has not been seen since, and her parents are beginning to fear the worst.
The problem is that, yeah, you saw her alive there, but you don't know what's happened in the meantime. Okay, she made it to Georgia, but she only made it as far as Tunnel Hill. How come she's not here?
No new leads have surfaced in the last 24 hours, and Amber's father, Dale, is growing restless.
Very much a helpless feeling. I don't know what to do. I haven't slept 2 nights before. Emotionally, I'm just torn up.
Dale decides to play a more active role in the investigation.
I finally had enough. I had to go looking for Amber.
He drives to the site of Amber's last known whereabouts, the Dollar General store.
I had to walk up and down the aisles. I know that I'm not going to find her there, but I know that that's where she was. And I walked up and down these same aisles. I'm in the aisle where they have the lotions and the shampoos and the stuff, and I walk up and down that. And while I'm walking, I'm thinking, Amber, what's happened to you?
There are no new clues to be found inside. But outside, the store's property borders an expanse of densely wooded swampland.
So I walked out and back, and I walked a grid pattern by myself, looking for my daughter in the tall grass. I'm not going to deviate from a straight line for nothing. So I'm walking through the brambles, I'm walking through the berry bushes, I'm walking through everything.
Dale is driven by instinct, but terrified of what he might find.
I climbed down in the drainage culvert, walked that from one end to the other, walked out there through the mud as much as I could to find her.
After trudging through acres of jagged bramble and putrid swamp, Dale can go no further.
I just sat there and looked down. I was all scratched up, my legs were all muddy and everything. I remember buying some bottled water and washing my legs and stuff off. And I remember the dread of going home because I had not been successful.
The Sheriff's Department enlists the help of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, a state-run criminal justice organization.
Well, the GBI, they have more resources than we do. They bring us more manpower for searches.
Heading up the case is Special Agent Daniel Sims.
Time is of a critical element. The first couple of days is very important in the collection of facts and evidence, mainly because those things are perishable. They can go away. As far as investigative work, Amber was at the top of the list.
The first official step for the Bureau is to mount an extensive search throughout Tunnel Hill.
We organized a search with about 30 emergency personnel. The area around the Dollar General store is extremely rural. And it's hilly, if not mountainous. We wanted to make sure that she wasn't in the woods. Other officers searched the railroad tracks that transversed that strip mall that the Dollar General is part of. And we also had some individuals search the swampy area behind the Dollar General itself. And we did neighborhood canvas searches, went door to door.
This may be an awful thing to admit, but when they said that they were going to go back up there and search, I actually prayed that they wouldn't find Amber because that would mean a body, not my daughter.
You go into it with the hopes and aspirations that you'll find her alive. But at the same time, having traveled down these investigative roads before, you keep your eyes open for anything that's on the ground or motionless or, of course, the discovery of the human body.
But after an exhaustive search, the team comes up empty. Though Agent Sims is undeterred, The failure to uncover new evidence is a blow to morale.
The longer that anyone is missing, the chances of finding them lessens.
Dad and I both expressed that we felt that this was going to end badly, that there really wasn't a lot of hope. It was very hard to be hopeful because of the history as a family.
Although it's hard to fathom, Amber's disappearance is actually a familiar trauma for the Seeger family.
I had been through this once before when my brother disappeared.
It was winter, it was in January, and he tried to go to this party and he got lost and got stuck in the snow. We didn't know where he was for 2 years. He died of hypothermia. It was horrible for our family.
How could we as a family endure a long-term disappearance again? Would we be able to get through something like that?
Coming up, Amber's father suddenly finds himself at the center of the investigation.
And I remember breaking down. I found it unconscionable, but somebody could make that accusation against me.
Missing Michigan resident Amber Gerwick was last seen alive on April 10th, 2011, in a small-town Georgia convenience store. But in the days and weeks following, in spite of a concentrated search effort led by state and local police, no new leads have materialized.
When you know that you have a missing person and their family's grieving, it's hard not to think about that even when you're off duty. And I found myself thinking a lot about Amber and where she might be.
Distraught by the lack of answers, Amber's parents devote every spare moment to searching for their daughter.
Obviously, the detectives and the police and sheriffs and Agent Sims were all doing their part, but we needed to be doing something as well.
Amber's brother, Sean, designs a missing persons poster for his parents to distribute around town.
It had 3 pictures of Amber on it. Probably the most important picture, believe it or not, was a large angel tattoo on her shoulder. I was never happy that Amber got tattooed until we had this huge angel that we could put out there and say, here's an identifying mark that you can use to find her.
When she was younger, she was enamored with angels, and we're talking from an early age. We're talking 3 years old.
I had an angel pin, and when I saw the pin, I'd forgotten I had it. I pulled it out and I put it on. It served to help me. You know, I wore it every single day.
The Seegers launch a broad campaign to get the word out.
That poster was distributed in literally thousands of those things. We're all over the southeast United States.
We had put her listing on Facebook. We would post it and we would ask our friends to repost it, and Amber's friends were posting it and reposting it.
Dale and Jackie are desperate for their efforts to yield some new leads.
That was my full-time job, was finding Amber.
Meanwhile, Agent Sims is working every angle, including some of the darkest places on the criminal landscape.
There is a certain segment of our society that are predators, and they do target people. We did focus on local sex offender databases, and we actually interviewed some people that were on that list.
Then, on April 27th, disaster strikes the South.
Northeast Alabama and Northwest Georgia and Southeastern Tennessee got hammered with a series of F4 tornadoes. We had to divert ourselves from the investigation to focus on rescue efforts. It was a pretty trying time for everybody in the Northwest Georgia region.
Suddenly, at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Amber's case is no longer priority number 1.
We knew that he literally did not have time. That was rather devastating for us.
There might be, 2 or 3 hours a day that I could focus on Amber's investigation, and then it was right back to our efforts in helping the communities that were afflicted by the tornadoes.
But despite Agent Sims' vigilance, weeks go by with no new answers. For the Seegers, each passing day erodes their hopes of finding their daughter.
Amber had been missing for 3.5 weeks. We cried, we prayed, we didn't sleep. It was a real tough time. We were running out of ideas.
On May 4th at 1:30 p.m., Special Agent Sims calls the Seegers down to the station. He says he has an important matter to discuss with them.
He met us at the Sheriff's Department here in Gordon County, and he said that he needed to question us separately.
I told her that we had investigated the case thoroughly, that we had absolutely no evidence to suggest that her daughter had become the victim of foul play. We had no evidence that she was alive.
He said, we have no more leads. We don't know where to look anymore.
It wasn't that we were stopping the investigation. It was just at the stage where we knew that it would be easy to perceive that the investigation was grinding to a halt.
That was extremely upsetting.
For Jackie, what Agent Sims told her is almost impossible to accept. But when Agent Sims sits down with Dale, the news only gets worse.
During that meeting with him, he said something to me. Somebody had made the accusation that I knew where Amber was, and I was helping her to stay hidden.
Information had come our way that Dale would do this, and it was a bridge that I felt like I had to cross with him.
Dale feels blindsided by the accusation.
I remember breaking down. I found it unconscionable, but somebody could make that accusation against me.
One of the most unpleasant parts of my job is when I've got to sit down with somebody who is truly grieving and then challenge them as to whether they have committed a crime. I didn't feel like that the Seegers had engaged in this type of activity, but I just had to cross that bridge.
Agent Sims is convinced of Dale's innocence, but it comes as little relief.
After we got done with that discussion, he told me there was just nothing more they could do. I remember walking out of that interview room and feeling like I was carrying a 10-ton weight.
The Seegers' lives have taken on a hollow sadness they are convinced they will have to live with forever. But they soon would be proven dead wrong. Later that day, Agent Sims gets an unexpected call.
A few hours after I had this meeting with the Seegers, I received a call from the Whitfield County Sheriff's Office. One of the secretaries in the investigative division said, "You need to contact the Joliet, Illinois Police Department. There's a detective there that wants to speak to you." No matter how many cases you've done, no matter how many investigations that you have undertaken, every now and then somebody will throw a curveball at you from left field.
Only 2 hours after returning home, the Seegers' phone rings.
It was Special Agent Sims. I recognized the phone number and I said, "Yes, Special Agent." He says they've located a woman in Joliet, Illinois, who matches Amber's description, that has amnesia.
Their department had found a young female wandering in a city park and had flagged down the police. She was suffering from memory loss, did not know who she was, and that they had been dealing with a Jane Doe.
Then he says something Amber's father will never forget.
This woman had a tattoo of an angel on her back.
Coming up, A dramatic break in the case is not exactly what it seems.
I'm looking into a face that isn't right. I don't know how to explain it. She just didn't look right.
It's been 3.5 weeks since missing mother Amber Gerwick was last seen in Tunnel Hill, Georgia. Her family had all but given up hope of finding her when they received some astonishing news. An unidentified woman suffering from memory loss was found in Joliet, Illinois, nearly 600 miles north of Tunnel Hill. Joliet police think it's Amber.
They've located a woman that matched her description identically, that had an angel tattoo on her right shoulder.
In Joliet, the story of the woman who lost her memory had caught the attention of the local media, who broadcast a photo of the mysterious woman. The photo was seen by someone familiar with the missing person flyer posted on Facebook.
The Facebook communication was that this is the person you're looking for. She's Amber Gerwick.
Sims sends the Seegers a photo of the woman taken at Silver Cross Hospital in Joliet.
And there was Amber in a hospital bed, staring at us. I just said, it's her. It's her. And Dale's like, it's her. She's there. She's alive. We were jumping. We were screaming. We were crying.
My happiness wasn't even close to their happiness. Over the phone, you could hear that weight being lifted, you know, and all of a sudden this flood of hope coming into their heart that, you know, their daughter's alive.
But Dale notices something strange in the photograph.
I'm looking at Amber's picture, and I know it's Amber, but I'm looking into a face that isn't right. She just didn't look right.
Her eyes were empty, and I didn't see Amber's personality shining back at me.
Despite their misgivings about the photo, the Seegers are eager to get to Joliet. They pack their bags and begin the 600-mile drive that night. The next morning, Dale and Jackie head straight to the hospital.
The nurses gave us an update on Amber's condition and what was going on. She was unharmed. She was fine. The only thing that was wrong was her memory.
Amber is suffering from one of the most complex and puzzling conditions in medicine: transient global amnesia.
She didn't remember being married. She didn't remember having children. She just forgotten her life.
Dr. Lucy at Silver Cross put it this way: 99.99% of the doctors in this country will go through their entire career practicing medicine and will never see this type of amnesia, ever.
That afternoon, the Seegers finally get the chance to see their daughter face to face.
We saw Amber, and she was holding a little stuffed dog they had given her in the ER. And what I remember is my daughter taking one look at us, and she grabbed that doll and she hung it real close, and she started crying and said, "I don't know you. I don't remember you." And she just cried. I mean, she was just sobbing. And Jackie and I reassured her that was fine, that was no problem.
We had talked in the car and prepared ourselves for the possibility that she might not know us.
But for Amber, the reunion is a frightening realization of just how much she had lost.
They terrified me because I didn't know them. It was devastating not knowing who your parents are. Worse than not knowing who you are. These are the people who raised me. I remembered them the way they were when I was little, but I didn't know who they were at that moment.
Amber can only remember her life up to age 12. Almost all memories from her adult life have vanished.
I'd look in the mirror and the face that was looking back at me was not the face that I would expect. You know, I'd expect to look in the mirror and see that kid that I was, and it was an adult looking back at me.
The Seegers spend the next few days slowly walking Amber through the last 2 decades of her life.
They were explaining to me that I'd been missing and how long I'd been gone and how she had this angel pin. And I loved angels.
I gave her the pin and I told her, Amber, told her why I'd worn it every day. And now you need to find yourself. So this is your angel pin now to help you find yourself.
At the end of the week, Amber is reintroduced to her 4 children.
She met with each of them for a half an hour, one at a time. It was a difficult thing, but she enjoyed seeing her kids, and they were overjoyed.
Amber is released from the hospital and travels with her parents to Georgia to begin a long and strenuous recovery process. But many questions still remain, particularly what happened the night she disappeared. Fortunately, Amber can recall her last hours of lucidity.
I remember studying, sitting at my computer, trying to get schoolwork done.
In the early evening, Amber took a break from studying and headed to a nearby convenience store.
I remember going down to the car and getting there and realizing I'd left my phone upstairs. All I had grabbed was my keys and my wallet. I didn't see any reason to go back upstairs to grab my phone when I was only going to be gone for a few minutes. I went to the convenience store down the road. I picked up a couple of small things there, and then that's it. It just stops. It's like there's nothing else after that until I remember the hospital.
Doctors assume Amber spent the next 3.5 weeks in what is known as a dissociative fugue state.
Dr. Lucy told us that the person that is in the fugue state can still operate. They can take care of themselves. They just don't know what's going on. They don't remember it.
But no one knows what triggered the episode.
We know that a traumatic event can cause global amnesia. That's what we believe happened.
Amber numerous times has been very specific in a fear that a man walks up behind her, puts his left hand on her right shoulder and spins her around. This is something new.
I believe that somebody grabbed her from behind and either frightened her terribly or did something to her and she ran.
Amber is still haunted by the dark gaps in her memory. She still has no idea where she was, where she ate, or where she slept at night during her fugue state.
I refuse to think about what happened during those 3.5 weeks when I was missing. What caused me to walk away? What caused me to just disappear like that? What happened to me while I was gone? I could drive myself crazy thinking about those things. I've had to stop thinking about it and just accept that those 3.5 weeks are gone and that I'll never get them back, even if I get the rest of my life back.
Today, Amber is still working to recover the memories she lost, but she has a positive outlook towards the future.
There's so much she doesn't know, so much she doesn't remember, and she wants to know it all. She wants to learn it all. She's remembering a little bit more each day.
The Amber that you see today is the Amber that she's always been. There's really no change in her personality. Her sense of humor is the same.
The best thing that has come out of having amnesia, I've had this opportunity to examine my life and the decisions that I made from an almost a third-person perspective.